It's known that most of the Jewish people did not have last names until relatively recently, except some Jews who lived in Muslim lands. There the idea of last names was much older, but in the European countries, most of us got our last names just a few generations ago. So one of the last names that existed is Tam, T-A-M or T-A-M-M. Now, this last name exists not only by the Jews. There are a number of nationalities that have such a last name. But in particular, the last name Tam that existed among Jewish people might be the descendants of the sages whose kinui is a kind of title in this case, was Tam. What do I mean by this? Now, every Orthodox Jew knows about Rabeinu Tam. This was a sage, a grandson of Rashi, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki. His grandson, Rabeinu Tam, was extremely well known because he was the main Baalei Tosafot. In the commentaries to the Talmud, the most important commentary is written by Rashi, and the second most important commentary is Tosafot, which are also printed on the page in all the standard editions of the Talmud. And the Tosafot is a collection of many sages. It's not one person's commentary. It's actually a group of sages that lived mostly in Northern Europe for a few hundred years. And the most well-known Baalei Tosafot was a grandson of Rashi named Rabbi Yakov Tam. So his name was Yaakov, and they used to call him Tam, because in our weekly reading, Yaakov is called Ish Tam, a wholesome man, maybe. It's a question how to translate this word, Tam, in this particular case. So it turns out that in the circles of Baalei Tosafot, in those areas, a number of other people also named Yaakov, they used to call them Yakov Tam. Not only Rabeinu Tam, the most famous one, the grandson of Rashi, but there were other people whose name was Yaakov, who also were called Yakov Tam. And eventually apparently developed as a last name. For instance, there was a famous Russian physicist of Jewish descent who might have been a descendant of one of these Rabbi Yakov Tams. His name was Igor Tam. He was a physicist whose specialty was actually nuclear physics. And there were all kinds of other people with last name Tam. And like I said, it's not only a Jewish last name, but it's one of the Jewish last names too, and possibly coming from this word. Interestingly, the four sons in the Pesach Haggadah, one of them is called Tam. And according to some commentators, including the Vilna Gaon, Tam here means not somebody who is not so smart, not a stupid son, but rather a son who is bitmimut, just like Yaakov Tam. In this case, it doesn't mean a son who is not knowledgeable or too young to ask a more sophisticated question. Rather, it's a son whose question is simple because he's Tam. He has tmimut. He has the simplicity, not in the sense of lack of understanding, but rather in the sense of working before Hashem in ways of being simple. The truth is that Noach already is called by the Torah Tamim. Yaakov is called Ishtam, and Noach is called Tamim. So it's a similar word, and it certainly means something really good. It's not the lack of understanding, but rather it's a certain level of choosing to be simple before Hashem. There's an interesting story that at some point Rav Nachman of Breslov, an important Hasidic rabbi, wrote, where the two main characters are one that was extremely sophisticated and one that was very simple. But the simple man could actually become quite smart. It's not a question of smart versus stupid. It's a question of Tam versus oftentimes a person whose mind is too convoluted and becomes wicked. So the Vilna Gaon explains that the four sons, it's two pairs. The son that's Tam, simple son, is kineged, is the opposite of the son who is wicked. And the other two pairs, the other pair is the son who is wise versus the son who doesn't know what to say. However, this is not the only possibility. There are those who say that in Pesach Haggadah, in fact, the son that's Tam is not the same as Yaakov ish Tam. And there, in fact, in Pesach Haggadah, he could be a son that's not so smart. In fact, In the Jerusalem Talmud, in Yerushalmi, what's called, in Masechet Pesachim, they actually say it openly, that there are 4 sons. One of them is wise son, one of them is wicked son, one of them is tipesh, stupid son, and one is the son that doesn't know what to ask, too young to ask. So at least according to the opinion of the Jerusalem Talmud, the 3rd son, he's not called Tam though, but he is actually openly called tipesh, foolish son. But there are other differences also, by the way, in regards to how the questions and answers of these 4 children are treated in the Jerusalem Talmud at the end of Pesachim versus in our Haggadah, which is based on a halachic midrash called Mechilta, commentary to Sefer Shemot, the 2nd book of Moshe. The halachic commentary is called Mechilta, and that's where the source is for our versions of the Pesach Haggadah with the 4 children. And that's what I wanted to say for today, based on this week's description of Yaakov Tam. If you like this video, please press like and please subscribe to our channel.